عرض كتاب المرتد لمؤلفه يورام فان كلافرين. ولد في أمستردام عام 1979 لعائلة هولندية بروتستانتية ملتزمة. كان سياسيا في حزب الحرية، وهو حزب قومي معاد للإسلام. كانت لديه رغبة شديدة بتأليف كتاب ضد الإسلام. أثناء تأليف الكتاب المعادي للإسلام تعرض لمعلومات تضاربت مع فكرته الخاطئة عنه. تغيرت نظرة الكاتب للإسلام أثناء بحثه العلمي به، حتى انتهى به الأمر أن أصبح مسلماً.
Well, my name is Yórám. I was born in Amsterdam in 1979 in a pretty regular Dutch family. The only thing that wasn't regular was that we were a Protestant family, a practicing Protestant family, and most of the people in the Netherlands, of course, are nowadays liberal, secular. So that was a little off. Why I wrote the book? Well, of course, most of the people in the Netherlands know that I was an active politician for the Freedom Party. It's an anti-Islamic nationalist party of Geert Wilders, the guy with the blonde hair. And I was a very active member of the Freedom Party, but at a certain moment there was this clash in the party, and I left. But I was still very anti-Islam, and during my my work for the Freedom Party, I always had this desire to write an anti-Islam book, because I wanted to explain to the people in the Netherlands or in Europe or wherever why we as a party thought that Islam was a danger. Not only for the Netherlands, but also for the West in general, and actually for the whole wide world. And in the Freedom Party, only Geert Wilders wrote books, so I wasn't allowed, in a certain sense, to write such a book. But I wanted to do, and after I left the party, of course, I had, I had time, and also the space to write this book. So I started writing my anti-Islam book. But during writing this anti-Islam book, I came across so much information that was at odds with the things I thought I knew, that it changed a little bit. And a very important part of this book is the fact that, of course, like I said in the beginning, I was brought up in a pretty practicing Protestant family. Especially when I was younger, we went to church, we all had biblical names, we prayed before and after dinner. My grandfather even was active in the church, so to say, as a help minister. So we were, as a family, pretty practicing. But as a youngster, let's say 16, 17 years, it's the first time that you start thinking about certain things in life, like why are we here, what are we doing here, what's the purpose of life. But also you start to reflect on your own situation, your own culture, and of course your own religion. And I had some doubts about, for example, the Trinity, the crucifixion, the atonement. Jesus Christ had to die for the sins of mankind, as Christians believe, before God could forgive mankind its sins. And, well, I had my doubts about certain dogmas, but I put them aside as a youngster, and I thought perhaps I'm not smart enough, because I didn't get any answers when I asked these questions to the ministers. And after a few years and years later, to be more specific, of course, I was there writing my anti-Islam book, but I wanted to explain it from a Christian perspective. So I made a comparison between the God concept in Christianity and the God concept in Islam. So I made this comparison. But while writing about Christianity, my doubts popped up again in a certain way. So the doubts I had, and which I put aside for many, many years, they popped up again. And now I was reading the concept of God in Islam, and it made much more sense. It was much more logical. And of course, because I studied comparative religion, I knew about the concept of God and the whole concept of religion in Islam compared to Christianity. But I never questioned it as an alternative for the truth with a capital T, because of course I was a practicing Christian, so I believed in Christianity. But now, while writing the book, and I was a little bit older, with those doubts I had about the dogmas of Christianity, I read it in a different way, and I start questioning it. And I got a lot of Islamic answers to my Christian questions. And of course, that didn't feel very nice, especially because I was an anti-Islamic politician, active still, because I was still in parliament. But I wanted to make sure that the book was correct, because I thought, well, when I publish this anti-Islam book, it has to be correct. Well, a lot of people will attack me, of course, if there is a little fault. So I thought it has to be correct. So what I did was writing to several authorities on Christianity, Judaism, because part 1 of the Bible is the Jewish Bible, and also Islam, because I was writing this book in a comparison between Christianity and Islam. And one of the people I wrote to was Abdul Hakim Murad, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad from Cambridge University. And well, he started explaining me some things about the core of Islam, and he advised me to read certain articles, certain books. I wrote to several people. So that's what I did. And during this search for more information, my whole attitude towards Islam changed bit by bit. So where I started writing my anti-Islam book with all these ideas that Islam was anti-Christianity, anti-women, anti-whatever, it was very negative. But gaining more information, it started changing the way I looked at Islam. So where I started writing my anti-Islam book, at a certain moment it changed into a search for truth, a search for information, and of course I ended up becoming a Muslim. But that had mainly to do with the fact that the information that I had wasn't correct. And of course there are a lot of books, and like I said, I studied comparative religion, so there's a lot of information in the West, but most of the information about Islam is written, especially in academia, is written by non-Muslims. So non-Muslims writing about Islam. And of course there's this history and the tradition where the Islamic world and the Western world are in a way competing with each other. So most of the information was biased. And Abdul Hakim Murad advised me to read Islamic sources and not so much Western sources about Islam. So I was writing, and I changed the way I gained information. So where I first started writing about Islam with the information I had from the Western scholars, and a lot of people are biased, and of course not everybody, but a lot of them, especially in a historical sense. And after a while, I started I changed the way of collecting information. So I was now also looking at the Islamic sources and the Islamic scholars. So that changed my perception of Islam in big time, because I saw the way, like the inner perspective of Islam. So I saw what Muslims believed. I saw what do they say about their own prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And the way I was thought when it comes to the prophet was very, very negative, because of course I told people I was raised in a Protestant environment, but the specific denomination of the church in a historical sense was very anti-Islam, because they said that Islam was in a way the religion of the devil. So it was, and the prophet, of course, was in that sense, and of course that's not what I believe now anymore, but that's what people wrote. In a way, he was like the Antichrist. So if you are raised in a way, especially because I read a lot of books, and you start believing that, and all of a sudden you see so much information that's almost 180 degrees different from what you thought. It starts. It brings a lot of questions to your mind. So when I was studying the life of the Prophet, and I looked at what he said and what he did, and how he treated the people around him, and I didn't saw him just as someone who was waging war. First of all, I saw the context of those wars. I saw, well, he was protecting the people, he was fighting for justice. It wasn't that he just liked to wage war, and that was what I thought that he was doing. And a lot of Westerns still think that. So there was something that changed my perception. And then, of course, I was looking at him as a father, and I was looking at him as a neighbor, and I was looking at him as a friend and a teacher, and someone as a statesman. So I saw him in his full glory in a way. And that changed my perception of him and, of course, of his message. And that slowly made me, and it sounds a little crazy, but I fell in love with Islam in a way. So in the end, I decided, well, I already believed this monotheistic concept of God. So there was more in an Islamic sense, God than Christian, in the Christian sense. And of course, in the end, I saw that there were no arguments for me to say certain prophets in the Old Testament or Jesus in the New Testament are sent by God, but this man was not. So I had no arguments anymore. So and I saw his life, and like I said, I fell in love with the message and the whole concept of Islam. And it was the message he brought, of course, because he was the last prophet. And then I said, well, I cannot say he's not a prophet. So in a sense, if you say, I believe in one God, and I believe that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is a messenger of God, it's practically Shahada. And of course, I knew that, so I thought, well, I'll stop writing the book, because that's gone too far now, and I don't want to be a Muslim. And I put it aside, but and it sounds like a fairy tale, but when I put all my books on the shelf was a little bit too full, so a lot of books fell off the shelf, and one of the books that fell off the shelf was the Quran. So when I picked up the Quran, my thumb was like that when I picked it up. And it was on a surah, and that surah said, it's not the eyes that are blind, but the heart, in the translation, of course. And then I thought to myself, yeah, that's my problem, because I really could see what I have written and what I wrote down. Nobody forced me to write this book. Nobody told me you have to do this or that, or otherwise something will happen to you. No, it was pure out of free will. I was just searching, looking for truth with a capital T, and I found it and I wrote it down. But even after writing it down and seeing, well, these are the arguments in favor of Islam, these are the arguments in favor of his prophethood, etc., I still couldn't accept it. And when I saw this verse in the Quran, it was almost like it spoke to me, that said, it's not the eyes that are blind because you can see it, but it's your heart that's closed. And then I made, of course I wasn't a Muslim yet, but I made kind of a dua, and I said, well, Lord, if there is something out there that is the absolute truth, guide me to it. Make sure that I follow the right path. And of course there weren't any stars coming out of the sky, no rainbows and stuff like that, but I just went to bed. And the next morning when I woke up, I felt very secure and thought to myself, well, I'm a Muslim, so I will do Shahada. And after I did that, of course, because I was still writing the book changed a little bit, but I thought, well, I have to leave it like it was, because in the beginning I was anti-Islam, in the middle I was searching for the truth, and in the end I found the truth and I became Muslim. So that's all in the book. And the core part of the book is about the arguments against Islam, because that was the things, what kept me away from Islam. So in the beginning I started explaining why I thought Islam was a danger. Then I made a comparison between the concept of God in Christianity and the concept of God in Islam. Then all my objections against Islam fell while researching, while finding information, and that ended up me researching the life of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and that in the end was the final push, so to say, and that made me become Muslim, because I was so impressed about his life and his character and his message. So that's the book as a whole. So it's a comparison. It's a lot of arguments against Islam, and of course it has a conclusion, and that is me becoming a Muslim. And why did I wrote the book? Well, in the end, I started, of course, because I wanted to warn the world for Islam, especially the Netherlands and my own people. But in the end, after I became Muslim, we published it, and I did it mainly to explain to people what happened to me, because of course in the family, friends, my work, everybody was kind of shocked, and myself as well. So I had to explain it and show people that there was a rational way of becoming Muslim. So it had nothing to do with me wanting to marry a wife, or all my friends were Muslim. And all those reasons are good reasons, by the way. But it was, for me, that was not the way. It was just very dry information, researching, and then finding the truth. So that was the reason for me. So I wanted to explain it, first of all, to the people I love, because I wanted to show them I'm not crazy. This is what happened, and I think, and I hope, of course, that you will find the same truth that I found. And then, of course, for the people in the Netherlands, my old friends, my party, and basically everybody who, in a way, perhaps has something when reading the book. And perhaps it helps. It takes away misconceptions at least, and perhaps it's a help on the way of finding the truth in Islam. Yes. Well, of course, after the book was published in the Netherlands, and in the title in the Netherlands is Afvallige. It was also translated into English, and the English title, it's here. It's apostate, and it basically means the same, of course. And there is an Arabic translation as well, المرتد. So that's the same title as well. So we have 3 versions now: a Dutch version, an English version, and an Arabic version. And again, I hope that there are people that benefit from the book. That's why I wrote it, and to clarify misconceptions from my personal experience and research.